Hey everybody, Sean from Media Assault here, and got another review for you from my list of essential movies from this book. And once again, and I'll probably stop doing this after I'm about 3 or 4 more movies deep into this, but this is me reviewing all of the movies in this book, which is called Joe Layden's Guide to Essential Movies You Must See If You Read, Write About, or Make Movies. And this is review number 2. And this is the movie I'll be reviewing today. As you can see, it's Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror. Or I hope you can see that anyway. And this is a 1922 silent movie. It's about, well, it's basically an adaptation, an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. It was made in 1922, as I said, and basically it's only by a stroke of sheer luck that this movie even survives today, because F.W. Murnau and the studio were sued and all of the prints were ordered to be destroyed. Luckily, a number of prints had been distributed worldwide, so they couldn't destroy all of them. So the movie lives on today. And that's a good thing, and I'll tell you in a moment. There is one thing from this movie, even if you haven't seen it, you can thank this movie for it if you're a vampire fan. Basically, this movie does follow the same plot as Dracula. It does make some changes, and I haven't read Dracula, and I haven't seen the movie adaptation in a while either, so I'm not real familiar with the locations that are in that movie, but apparently they've been changed in Nosferatu to Bremen and Transylvania. So basically you've got this real estate guy, and his name is Hutter, or Hooter if it's German, H-U-T-T-E-R, not H-O-O-T-E-R if you're playing along at home. So basically what happens is he's a real estate agent, and he is told by his boss that there is a Count Orlok, who lives in Transylvania, who's interested in buying a home in the town where he lives. So he has to travel to Transylvania, leave his wife behind, travel to Transylvania, meet up with Count Orlok to do the paperwork, and what happens is the real estate agent finds that Count Orlok may be a vampire. The real estate agent, Hutter, I'll call him Hutter, even though it may be Hooter, but since I don't want to crack up every 5 minutes when I say his name, I'll say Hutter. He wakes up in the morning after a dinner with Count Orlok, who happens to be one of the strangest looking people he possibly could ever see. So if he doesn't suspect something is weird about this guy, there may be something wrong with him. He's got really pointy ears, really long, spindly fingers. He's really skinny. He looks almost like the Rat Boy, if you ever see the Weekly, or the Bat Boy, I think it is, from the Weekly World News, if you ever see that. He sort of looks like that. Anyway, so the real estate agent has dinner with Count Orlok. They sign the paperwork, and then Hutter goes to bed, and when he wakes up, well, actually he doesn't go straight to bed. He actually he kind of is scared because he cuts his finger while he's trying to cut some bread, and Count Orlok sort of reacts to the blood very excitedly. Hutter gets a little worried or afraid, I guess, and then he falls unconscious. When he wakes up the next morning, he has 2 holes in his neck, or 2 bite marks, and he thinks that he was bitten by a mosquito. So anyway, he comes to realize that he comes to realize that Count Orlok may be the creature called Nosferatu, which is, of course, a vampire. But he suspects this just a little bit too late, because since Orlok has signed the paperwork, he's hurriedly making preparations to leave, and he boxes up what look to be coffins and hurriedly takes off via boat to Bremen. So Hutter is left alone in Orlok's castle, and he has to find his way to get back to his wife. His wife has fallen under the spell of Count Orlok. Orlok saw a little photo that Hutter carried with him, and he has sort of this long distance hypnosis that he casts over Hutter's wife, and he goes. He sort of has a control over her. It's very, very cool. I won't tell you anything more about the plot, but it basically follows roughly the Dracula formula. There are several very cool things about this movie. First and foremost, the thing that I was going to tell you about, that you know from this movie whether or not you've seen it. Apparently, in the novel Dracula, sunlight has no effect on vampires. It is from Nosferatu that the whole sunlight being bad for vampires was injected into the vampire mythology. It's the first time that it was captured on film, and from what I've read, it's the first time that it's ever been mentioned in any vampire tale. So that is very cool, because everybody knows supposedly that vampires, can't go out in the daylight. If the sun hits them, they'll burst into flames. You've seen it in umpteen vampire films, and it came from this one. Also very cool is the performance of Max Schreck as Count Orlok / Nosferatu. He is amazing as the vampire. He skulks around. There's fantastic makeup done on him, and especially for 1922, he looks fantastic. His performance is great. He's by far the best thing about the film. The special effects, while they look really cheesy today, some of them are pretty effective. There are some negative exposure effects that Murnau uses in the film. There are some stop motion animation techniques that are used. They're really primitive, but they're used to fairly good effect. There are some instances where the film is sped up, which kind of has a comical effect, but it's pretty cool anyway. All of that put together is really interesting and very cool, very inventive for a 1922 film. It adds to the charm of this wonderfully creepy, even today. This movie's 80, 90 years old. It still works. It barely works, but it still can kind of creep you out, especially when Nosferatu is on screen. So that's all I'll really say about it. I highly recommend that you see it, especially if you're somebody interested in horror movies, know your classics. But if you're just looking for something that is a pioneering film, this also works on that level too. So I can see why it's included in the Essential Movies book. I'm very glad I saw it. I'd seen clips from it before, but as a horror fan, it's, like I said, it's good to know where your influences are coming from. So I really suggest seeing Nosferatu if you're a horror fan. And it can be found really cheap. The movie, in the U.S. anyway, is in the public domain. There are several different versions on DVD. I watched it on Netflix via their streaming section, the Instant View or whatever. The soundtrack on that is pretty cool. It's in Dolby Stereo, so it sounded really good. It's a little more modern than I think was presented with the film, obviously, when it played in theaters back in the day. But it sort of gives it a sort of a retro but sort of modern feel. So it's pretty cool if you watch that version. I don't know which version that would be if you went out to buy it on DVD. It may be the 2-disc remastered version, or it may be a completely different version. I'm not really sure. There's one put out by a company called Kino Video, I believe, and that may be the one, but I'm not 100% sure. I really like having the actual disc in front of me so I can tell you which one I saw and what to recommend you see. But on the streaming on Netflix, that's not possible. So I'm not 100% sure which version they used. But if you do have access to Netflix and you do have access to the streaming on Netflix, stream Nosferatu. I highly recommend that version of the film at least. So check it out. Nosferatu, I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10, even though it is old. It's not a perfect film, but it's worth sitting through. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. And Max Schreck as Nosferatu is really cool. And one little side note, there's a movie from, I believe, the year 2000 called Shadow of the Vampire, starring Willem Dafoe and Eddie Izzard. And Willem Dafoe plays Max Schreck. The angle of the movie, though, is that Max Schreck is really a vampire, and that's why his performance in Nosferatu is so good. He wasn't, for real, a vampire, obviously. He did play in other films, but Shadow of the Vampire is a good film to check out as well. But definitely see Nosferatu from 1922. That's it. Thanks for watching. Number 3 will be coming up shortly. It is The General, starring Buster Keaton. And then after that is City Lights with Charlie Chaplin. And then I'll be done with the silent movies from the book. And we'll be moving into some more modern films after that. But look for The General review possibly in the next couple of days. I'm going to try to do 3 of these a week. At least on that schedule, I'll get done in maybe 5 months. There are 64 films total in the series, the Essential Movie series that I'm doing. So hopefully I can knock them out pretty quick. But when it's a movie like Nosferatu, there's a lot to talk about. So I kind of rambled on a little bit. But anyway, check out my Essential Movies playlist on the channel. And by all means, if you like this video, subscribe. Check out the rest of my videos online. And comment, rate, subscribe. Thanks a lot.